have you go ahead and set the dog down.
I'm sorry, what?
Set the dog down.
Okay.
Thanks, sir. Turn around. Place your hands behind your back.
A recently resigned mayor from Pennsylvania is taken into custody as a fugitive on child sex crime charges on the other side of the country.
But essentially, we are alleging and believe it's true that Chad Allen Carr had groomed this particular individual from a time even before they were 16 years old.
For what?
It's going to be a child case.
I'll show you what this now disgraced politician said as authorities took him to jail again. We're on the case presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. In January of this year, a man named Chad Allen Carr took the oath of office to become the mayor of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly affirm
that I will support,
that I will support,
obey,
obey,
and defend the Constitution
and defend the Constitution.
Carr won this job with more than 56% of the vote, and back then optimism may have been high, but all of that has come crashing down.
Sheriff's office. Hey, we're looking for Chad.
Chad?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, hold on a sec. Did somebody ring the doorbell?
I think there might be somebody up there ringing.
This is body camera video out of Anderson County, Texas, which is more than 1,300 miles away from Gettysburg. Deputies came to this home looking for Chad Allen Carr. Now, before I get into what happened inside the house, let's talk about this incredible fall from grace in allegedly a very disturbing way.
Hi, my name is Chad Allen Carr, and I'm here at Gettysburg Community Theater. I'm the founding executive artistic director of the theater.
That is Carr in a video posted to Facebook talking about the nonprofit theater he helped run in Gettysburg. He was a fixture in the local community for years. On his LinkedIn, he said that he had the position at the theater since all the way back in 2009. And his position in the arts community seemed to propel him into the world of local politics. He was a member of the borough council. And then this past fall, he ran for mayor of the 8,600-person community of Gettysburg, of course, known as being home to one of the most notable battles in American history. And after Carr was sworn in at that council meeting in January, this is what he said as part of his first speech as mayor.
I also plan to continue working with young people in our community, helping them learn about public speaking and engaging constructively in a positive manner in all things.
You hear that line now, and it certainly sounds concerning, considering what authorities said only roughly 2.5 months later.
The reason we've asked you to gather today is that the Pennsylvania State Police has made an arrest of Chad Allen Carr.
That is the DA for Adams County, Pennsylvania, speaking on March 13th in a news conference per WGAL-TV.
We've charged Mr. Carr with 3 counts: possession of child pornography, criminal solicitation to commit possession of child pornography, and corruption of minors. And what we've alleged is that through a certain period of time between 2011 and 2013, Chad Allen Carr solicited inappropriate material from at least one individual who was a 16-year-old boy at the time of the solicitation and when the information was shared.
The DA is alleging that Carr groomed a young boy, a boy who said he knew Carr since he was 8 years old, and then said that there was inappropriate activity between Carr and this boy when he became allegedly a teenager.
He developed a relationship with that person, groomed that person, and ultimately was able to successfully entice that person into sharing nude photographic images, nude video images, and inappropriate criminal behavior that constitutes crimes under our criminal statutes in Pennsylvania.
Now, authorities say Carr allegedly used his role in the theater community as a place to groom that boy.
This particular young man indicates that he was involved in the theater community at a young age. Then when he got to the high school, Chad Allen Carr was the volunteer in charge of theater. He was hard on him at first, was kind of standoffish or I want to say a little confrontational, as he was with other young people who were involved in the theater community. And then that all changed. And I think the change in that was to show this young person that there was an interest. This young person, being young and maybe being particularly vulnerable, gave into that interest. And then next thing you know, they're being perpetrated for criminal behavior.
At the time authorities in Pennsylvania made this announcement, Carr had already left office. He resigned on March 3rd, and the Gettysburgian, which is a newspaper there, said that Carr was stepping down at the time with personal legal issues. This was before the charges he was going to face were made public.
The charges are a felony of the 2nd degree. Each of those 2 carry a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison. Corruption of minors is a felony of the 3rd degree and carries with it a maximum penalty of 7 years in prison. There were potentially other criminal charges that would have applied. However, the statute of limitations has barred some of those charges. Nothing necessarily more significant, but there would have been additional charges.
The DA said that the alleged victim in the case they talked about in March came forward and agreed to share what they say Carr allegedly did to them.
Bail was set at $100,000. Obviously, he's entitled to post that bail if, in fact, he's able to come up with the money or somebody is on his behalf.
Now, bail is an important part of this story because it was set at $100,000, and the now former mayor was able to post that, and when he did, he left Pennsylvania. Then, about a month later, a major change in this case because authorities needed to find Carr to rearrest him, but he was no longer in PA, he was no longer on the East Coast, and we'll go into why in just a moment. Authorities were able to track him down in small town East Texas.
Sheriff's office. Hey, we're looking for Chad.
Chad?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, hold on a sec. Did somebody ring the doorbell?
I think there might be somebody up there ringing.
Okay, I think he went to answer the door.
Okay.
Y'all want to come in?
I would love to.
They're looking for you, Chad.
I'll have you go ahead and set the dog down.
I'm sorry, what?
Set the dog down.
Okay.
Thanks, sir. Turn around. Place your hands behind your back.
They've got a warrant for an old Pennsylvania.
You got anything on you?
A warrant from Pennsylvania.
A warrant for what?
It's going to be a child case.
We're going to talk to you about that.
Okay.
Pennsylvania has issued a warrant for you for some reason.
Okay.
And we're just here to serve you.
Can you call the attorney?
I will.
Yeah, let them do that.
Okay.
And I appreciate y'all being cooperative with me. I will contact his attorney. I don't know. They're probably going to extradite him.
All right, these cuffs are double locked. They're not going to tighten up or hurt you in any way unless you pull on them.
Extradite him back to Pennsylvania. This is a new warrant.
Is this just your phone and stuff? Your phone pocket here?
Yes, sir.
Phone and wallet?
Phone and wallet.
They're telling me it's a new warrant, Chad.
That's fine. Can you take my belongings out of my pockets and put them and give them to my mother?
Be more than happy
We
to.
just need your ID. Okay.
We are going to take your ID with you.
Okay.
You don't have anything else in any of your other pockets?
No, sir. I might have Burt's Bees in the.
Okay,
in the
I think I can operate one of these. Look at that. It's going to be you.
There you go.
It
And we'll
looks like
put that in
that.
your property.
Okay.
Would you like me to go through the rest of your pockets?
I think there might be a
I can see it.
chapstick there. No, sir.
Pennsylvania authorities say 3 more victims came forward after that news conference that we showed you with the district attorney. And according to local media, authorities hit Carr with more charges. 2 counts of second-degree felony sexual assault, 1 count of second-degree felony involving sexual depictions of a child on a computer, and 2 counts of misdemeanor corruption of minors. Carr's attorney told the Evening Sun newspaper that there were no travel restrictions on Carr's bond, that he was free to go wherever he wanted. He is originally from Texas, and per that body camera video, it appears that he had been at his parents' house because you hear his mom, or a woman who identifies as that, on video. Now, the local sheriff in Texas said that Pennsylvania authorities would now extradite Carr back to their state. Joining us now to talk more about this case, criminal defense attorney Joe Tamburino. Always great to have you here on Law and Crime. I know the attorney for Chad Allen Carr says there were no travel restrictions on his bond, but he went quite a ways away from Pennsylvania once he posted that bond. Is that still something the court considers now?
Well, thanks for having me on, Chris. Yeah, the court could consider it, but if there were no travel restrictions on his original bond, he's not going to get in trouble for that. So what could have happened is, since there are no travel restrictions on his initial bond, he simply went to Texas to visit family, friends, who knows who. And then while he was out of state, out of Pennsylvania, these new charges issued, and they issued them as a warrant rather than as a summons and complaint. So I think his attorney is going to be able to do a good explanation for that.
Because with that, it seems pretty aggressive where, here he is, he's facing more charges, now in Pennsylvania after the fact, very serious charges, and they have the local sheriff end up tracking him down, going in and taking him into custody this way. In some cases, we might see someone who gets to turn themselves back in, maybe he'll fly back to Pennsylvania and he'll go to the police station later. What do you make of just how this went down, where they seem to call in a good amount of deputies to take him into custody?
Well, probably for a couple of reasons. Number one is you have multiple child at the time victims, and that means serious charges. In Pennsylvania, though I'm not licensed there, but my understanding is these charges could carry up to 20 years in prison. And of course, you have multiple victims. And the second part is that obviously this is a high-profile person for Pennsylvania. He was the mayor of a very historic town, Gettysburg itself. So I'm sure those 2 factors were the impetus for them to treat this case very seriously and to get right on it to try to get him back into Pennsylvania.
Now, on his end, and he hasn't been brought back to PA on these new charges yet. I think he's in the process of being extradited there. 3 more alleged victims came forward after Pennsylvania authorities announced the first case, which they held a news conference for. So you have these victims, and there's 2 counts of sexual assault now that he's facing. How do you defend a client when you have multiple people with multiple different stories about what they allegedly did?
It's very difficult, and it takes quite a long time. But one of the things you do is try to have separate trials. For instance, sometimes a prosecutor will charge a case where you have several offense dates all in one complaint, or several victims in one complaint, and you make motions to sever, meaning to separate these offense dates, to separate the victims, so that you don't have in one jury trial all of these people coming in. So that's the first thing, to try to handle these cases separately. Second, you have to look at change of venue. If all of these alleged victims are from Gettysburg or the environs around Gettysburg, you're going to have to think about going to a different part of the state. Now, changes of venue, they're difficult. They don't happen too often, but it's something you would have to consider. And then lastly, you're going to have to do a highly due diligent job in jury selection. You're going to need a questionnaire because you have to weed out the people who have heard about this case, who have heard about multiple victims.
When it comes to the severing of this case, because now you have, by my count, 4 alleged victims at this point, and again, all their stories are different. They're accusing him of different things. How likely is it that the court looks at this and says that we can have separate trials for each one of these victims?
Most of the time you would get separate trials unless they are so close together in time, in manner of behavior, that the alleged victims all were part of this type of assault that allegedly happened. Maybe they were in the same location when it happened. Maybe they were allegedly preyed upon at the same time. If you have factors like that, well, then it's going to be more difficult to get them severed. But if you have separate victims, separate offense date, separate locations, then I think your chances are quite high that you'll get separate trials.
I also imagine, too, if there's all one trial and you look at the allegations that are coming in, and some of them, because these go back to as far back as 2011. So it's, this isn't something that he's being accused of recently, but if one victim says something and then as a defense attorney, you try to take down their story to try and defend your client, but then it's like after a while, it just builds up and up and up. If you have 4 victims accusing him of that, like how much of a challenge is that when it's just the volume of people who have come forward accusing a client?
It's an extreme challenge because you're going to have to look at a couple of extra factors too. Number one, are there any statute of limitation issues? Now, in most cases, they're not. Most cases that involve juvenile, that is, because in most states, when you have a person who was allegedly sexually assaulted as a juvenile, but they didn't report it, and then they reported it later on when they became an adult, usually, depending upon the state and the time period, the statute of limitations has been met. So there's not an issue, but you still have to check it out. Second is you're going to have to make a determination as to whether or not your client's going to testify at all these trials. Because think about it. If there are 4 separate trials, that means he could potentially testify 4 separate times. And that could be quite a process for a client, a defendant. So, having all of these come at you, even in separate trials, is going to be a high mountain to climb.
Because I look at, let's just, the charges that he was first accused of back in March by the Adams County District Attorney. It's related to this boy who said that he knew Carr since he was 8 years old. And then as he got older and he was part of the theater community, they started doing what he called alleged late night chats. And that's where allegedly there were some bad images that were sent back and forth. But this goes back to 2011, 2013. Like if you don't have those images, if you're law enforcement, like how does a prosecutor actually make a case that's stronger than just someone's word? Or is that enough in some cases for a jury?
It would be extremely difficult if you did not have the images. Could you prove the case without the images if you had other types of evidence, such as, say, 2, 3, 4 witnesses who said, yes, I saw these images. I saw them right after the defendant allegedly took them. I saw the images of the defendant at the time, and here's what they depicted. But it would be very difficult to get a conviction on those. Now, those are the lesser charges, though. The main charges here are going to be the actual sexual assaults. That's got some pretty heavy prison time. Usually the imaging, that type of a crime, though a felony, many times wouldn't put you into prison per se.
Right. And, you have these victims. I'm not saying that they're not telling the truth, but if, someone's going in with the presumption of innocence and you have to prove that this definitely happened, I mean, there's a pretty strong timeline here, a long timeline going back to when all of this allegedly began. The DA talked about grooming. That's a term we hear a lot in cases like this, these sex crime cases. He's not facing a particular charge of grooming, but like, how does that concept, the relationship that he allegedly had with these victims, how does that factor into what plays out in the courtroom?
In many of these cases, grooming is always a factor, though grooming in almost all states is not an actual crime itself. It is relevant to the sexual assault of a minor. Now, how does this make sense? How does it become relevant? Basically in two ways. Grooming is a process where allegedly a defendant will try to gain the trust of a victim before they become a victim. So they'll see the 15-year-old boy or girl, and they'll try to gain trust with them, become buddies, friends, do things with them, so on and so forth. And then you get into the second part of it, which is you try to get the victim to be accustomed to certain activities. What could those activities be? Looking at pornography, looking at each other's, private parts. And then sometimes that gets into certain touching that might not be illegal, but it's still touching. And then, so that's what grooming is part of. You gain the trust, and then you try to get the victim accustomed to certain behavior. And in the end, why the perpetrator would do this in any given case is so that obviously he or she could complete the crime, and there would be a lesser chance that they would be caught, meaning that the victim would report it because they become accustomed to it.
And then on the civil side, because he worked at this nonprofit community theater for years, he was a volunteer at the local high school in the theater department as well. I mean, this was someone who was around children a lot. What are some, and I know police said in their news conference that there wasn't anything to this point that they knew of criminally related to the schools or anything like that, but what might a civil attorney look at here if you're representing the family of one of these victims and you're believing and you're alleging that these are the locations where at least the grooming started, if not, other things related to the charges that Carr is now facing?
Well, first thing you have to look at is the civil statute of limitations for that particular tort. A tort is a civil action based on a wrong when someone was physically, emotionally wronged. So, like you hear many cases where somebody they were abused, say, when they were 17 years old and now they're 40 and they try to sue the perpetrator. But in many states, that statute has long ran, so they really don't have any civil remedies. So any personal injury attorney, any plaintiff's attorney, the first thing they would look at is, can they still bring suit? Meaning, do they still have time within the statute of limitations? And assuming that they do, then the next thing they look for is, does the particular party have liability? So let's use the school as an example. Could the plaintiff's attorney get evidence that the school didn't do a proper background check? They were on notice that the defendant allegedly had certain behaviors that were questionable, had a background that was questionable, or they failed to supervise him properly. So first would be the statute of limitations, and second would be where would be the liability.
And we'll see what happens next. He is on his way back from Texas after that arrest. Joe Tamburino, criminal defense attorney. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and we're also streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart.